right, welcome to the show. Very excited to have everyone here with us again. Let me get my little pen thing going. Where are you, pen thing? Oh, come on. Oopsie, I knew you'd go. There you are. Love starting a show this way. In any event, series 1 with my good friend Tom Schreiber, episode 5, which is about chapter 5 in the book. Welcome to the show, and let's get started here. So, every show we have a theme. The book has its own theme. The show is based on a book, and the book's theme is red pill, blue pill. But in each show, I also create a theme. In this case, the theme is called the money shot. And the reason the theme is called money shot, Tom, careful, but do you know why? Because this is the episode that's all about money. However, I will tell you, I've done a lot of use. I've used ChatGPT quite a bit, coming up with ideas in the show and things like that. And I have a couple of little funny things to share first, and one of them is that. So without further ado, we'll get started. We'll tell you what the show's about, and we'll get to the segments. In any event, I was curious if people would take money shot the wrong way. So I asked ChatGPT, what does it mean? And it says the scene that cost the most money to produce, but then it went into adult films. And I was like, whoa. And it quickly deleted itself. So I'm not saying that to be crude. However, the fact that this bot was giving different definitions of something that could be construed as not unethical, but let's just call it not NC-17 or PG-13 or whatever. There probably needs to be rating systems on bots. Actually, that would be a great idea. And so what I was thinking, Tom, is that Urban Dictionary,
yes,
license they're like, they would make more money if I don't think they do this, but it would be too much of a business change. But I bet they would make more money licensing and helping people understand what's NC-17 versus R versus X, by offering a small or a middle language model to make sure people can't take advantage of the system.
yes. They're basically taking the output of whatever is initially generated and then
making sure it doesn't, create problems. All right, so I also have been playing a lot with ChatGPT to see how funny it can be. And in some cases, I'm doing it myself. In other cases, I found somebody else doing it. So this guy asks, is this a joke? Man walks into a bar and requests a martini. The bartender says, ha ha ha, no martini for you today. And ChatGPT apparently says, yes, that's a joke. And so then he asks, tell me a joke that's not funny. And I love this. These are like excellent dad jokes. If I could get the thing to do excellent dad jokes, which you can search like top 100 dad jokes on Google or Bing or whatever, but this thing's generating its own, I think. So that's cute. Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself? Because it was too tired. That's a great bad dad joke. So then it says, tell me one that's not funny. Why couldn't the leopard play hide and seek? Because he was always spotted. So I think by telling it to do a bad dad joke, it actually does a really good job. And my favorite, I think, is the last one. Why couldn't the shrimp sing A Christmas Carol? Because he was too shellfish. In any event, over here on the right, this is the problem I've been running into. And I've even tried comedic bots on the ChatGPT store. But this one just doesn't make sense at all to me. So needs it all depends on the context. Input equals output. So with that said, I'll give you one more. And this was one I think we all knew in like 5th and 6th grade or wherever you learned the F-bomb. And I think everyone knows this one, but it was smart enough, apparently, and I haven't tested this myself yet, but to say the word fire truck. Wonder what would happen if you asked it to list 10. We'll have to see some other time. So, here joining me in this show is my business partner and longtime friend, Tom Schreiber. This is what Tom's company does. He has been working in M&A, VC, product growth, business growth, and this is what his firm does. He's been doing that for a long time. We've known each other for 20 years. This is how you can reach him. Of course, this is his website down here. And again, I love the shirt. Love the shirt. That's your money shirt, right?
It is.
So I always dedicate the show to my daughter, Emma, and love you, sweetie. And then like to start off and take a moment to just breathe. So I've learned so much from people in business throughout my life. I've studied so many people to learn something. And I want to be grateful for that. It's been a crazy ride being in the software industry for so long, lots of ups and downs. But if this show makes you laugh and learn, please repost and spread the word. For that, I am very grateful. Let's inhale. And exhale. You never inhale and exhale with me, man. Ever. It's so disappointing.
I do.
You do? I just can't tell.
I do.
Okay. All right. Let's keep going here. So at the beginning of each show, we kind of explain the synthesis, the focus of the show. And when we've been out there talking to people in the market, everyone's like, oh yeah, I do generative AI. We do generative AI. And what they're typically talking about when you, pull back the covers and unpack it is they're in step one. They got somebody in sales or a few people playing with bots in different ways. Then you got products and services doing it. Of course, there's people that are designing an actual Gen AI app. That's a little different. But if they're not, then they're playing with it. And the same with the marketing folks. And everybody's going to, as an individual, like I think we've proven on last shows that we can be 10 to 100 times more productive, and in a relatively short development time frame can create things that are 1,000 times more productive or more. I know a lot of people question that, but watch the show. It should have an impact on your life. That's the purpose of why the show was created, to help people get from step one here to step 10. And again, I want to point out step 10 right here. The idea here is that you have this orchestrated set of bots that somehow can interact with each other and eventually produce some set of outcomes in a coordinated fashion that will help a customer have a more, I don't like how I drew that one. Will have a customer like a big stick coming out of his legs. That's not what I wanted to communicate. In any event, help a customer experience the whole company's customer experience in a different way. And when you do that, you've got a money bot. And this is why the show is got the theme, the money shot, because we're going to spend this show talking about money. And this is just a quick reference. If anyone is in step one, if you want to get to step 10, and the columns don't mean anything in specifically, I just didn't squeeze them all together, but every box is a concept around prompt engineering. And prompt engineering is not just done by engineers. You need a business person, whether that's the developer or not, to really understand how to help design the prompt and which elements go where and why. And so if you search all this stuff, you will on if you ask about it on ChatGPT, and I will show a link to my bot that is built for the book at the end. You can learn a lot by just asking about these things. So with that said, episode 5, and I hate when I do this, I've got 1, 2, 2, 3. This should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but we're going to do a fast chapter recap. Then we're going to get into chapter 5. We'll do some whiteboards and demos intermixed. As you can see here, I changed the money ball without in past episodes, we always have the red pill, blue pill theme of the book, which you see as an example of me programming generative AI for different outputs. And we've talked about those a lot. In this case, I just have one shot, the money shot, which was the one you saw on the front page. And what I've added here is a filter. All right, just one filter, but you can see completely different output, right? And if this was text, which we really covered, I think, deeply in chapter 2, episode 2, right? There's all kinds of parameters and thinking about templates and variables and pipelines and filters that apply here in generative AI. And in this case, it's one filter. I took the original output and I changed it completely with one filter. And you can certainly do that. There's many different ways to do that. So, Tom, I don't know if you know what this says. Descarga gratuita de libros en mi sitio web. Gracias.
Whatever you've got free, send me. Thank you.
Say what?
What you've got free, send it to me. Thank you.
Yes, something like that. It's actually a free book download at my website. So that is actually Spanish for that. In any event, please, subscribe, get notified, comment, follow on YouTube and LinkedIn. But I want to say the main thing is send us questions, challenge us to think, ask us to expand on something, get in touch. And we really love our audience participation. And we'll tell you why in a minute. Goal number 1, help leaders improve outcomes with generative AI. So it's kind of the leadership teams within companies are the main ICP, but we also know anyone on the tech side, particularly those that are venturing more into adding business value, will find this very helpful. And goal number 2, which I just referenced, this is why we want you to ask us questions and send things in and all that kind of stuff, because we want to go on the journey together. Again, this whole thing was written, the book and the show is being done to help people and companies get through this faster, easier, better, so that people who are going to get automated by AI can basically build the skill set more quickly and get back into being a business person, frontline, top line, whatever, faster. And this is going to be fast, but not easy, as I've said before. The reason I paused and stared in the air, because I also want to say this, it's not just the frontline worker, right? If you're a CEO and you are not technical, you're going to be relying heavily on your CIO and CTO. There's a lot of jobs out there that require a very technical CEO. And so even at that level and the next tier and the next tier, right, it's going to change how you manage the company or any part of the business that you manage, period. There's a lot of reasons why any non-technical, AWS is not going to make somebody from a non-technology background into running the company, and neither will any software company except for certain circumstances. But anyway, with that said, here's our sweet spot. We're going to look at how product, sales, and marketing come together and how the customer experience is going to be driven by generative AI apps. One thing I forgot to do is start my timer. So we're probably about 5 minutes into it and we'll keep going. I also will speak to this. We did it, was it the last show? Yeah, the last show. So show 4, which was about chapter 4, really talked about how I was replaced or kind of replaced myself with AI. And Tom, I think at the end of that, we were like, wow, that show was pretty good. What was one of the, just 30-second big thought about unpacking each one of those things that I'd done? And I've been talking to you about these the whole time over the past 20 months or so as I was doing them. What was one of your big takeaways about my experience of being replaced by AI?
Well, I mean, it's not like it was a trivial sort of thing to do, but I mean, you went out and you've had in-depth customer interactions with over 30 startups. as part of your function with 8 base where you were previously.
Yeah.
And those aren't just casual conversations. Those things
No.
were things which were very much in depth about what they were trying to do, their value proposition, how they were developing, the development platform they were on, their ability to develop quickly or not quickly. Um, they're helping them to understand the value that the platform brings to their applications, and that a good platform brings 80 to 90% of the functionality and the value. Um, and then
Yeah.
you thought about proving that with each of them.
Yep.
And when you first started doing that, you didn't have as many capabilities as you did towards the end. But this is something that you were doing religiously with these as a
Oh,
discipline.
daily putting in 10, 12-hour days at least. Yeah, for sure.
And that discipline, repeated over and over again, in very different circumstances with different startups, led to much more than what I would call much more than a trivial understanding of what it takes to
Fair
be
enough.
able to bring proof to these people in a variety of circumstances. And
Yep.
so as you got to the point where more and more of you was replaced or augmented by AI, um, it became very, let's put it this way, you had to work to make that happen. It just didn't happen by
No,
itself.
it didn't happen by itself. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
But it's
yes. But
doable. I think if somebody watches that show, it's I don't see how anyone, and you and I like to poke holes in things and say if this is, bull caca, then, don't say it or don't present it. We like leading with, the truth of outcomes and things like that. But I think it's very difficult to deny if you see that show and you hear the story of how things unfolded. And even if you've seen, the demos we play throughout the show, it's pretty impossible to deny just how much more automated you can get. And there were certain use cases where where I was 10 times more automated. There were certain use cases where 100 times, and then we saw use cases where it was 1,000 times or even more. This is real, right? And so the show is about helping people get through this journey. And real quick, I've done a lot of generative consulting and advisory stuff, focusing a good bit on education and its growth ventures. Tom and I have worked together for a long time, and we're kind of one unit in many ways, but we've each got our own independent shingle. In any event, here is yet another filter. A single filter makes this look completely different. And I want to draw the analogy because a prompt, I don't know if you can read this. I should probably use white or go into a dark area, but that says prompt. A prompt can be a full page. A prompt could be 10 pages, right? In this case, the prompt is just one input change, one variable change, but this could just as soon be my whole book. All right, 80 pages unfolded, 160 folded. And if I put enough time and energy into it, except for the diagrams, right? But any of the text, I can get it to spit really strong information for this profile or that profile or that profile by changing one prompt, which could be 10 pages, let's just say. In any event, does that make sense?
I mean, we work in and out of this every day, so it's
I
yeah.
guess let me just re-say it is we're looking at an image, and we use images a lot to explain prompting because it's visually it really helps hammer the point home, right? Which is something you brought up. What I'm saying is I use generative AI to create the original image. And this could have been text. That says original. This could have just as soon been text. All right, that says text. And by changing one variable, I got the original to change to whatever this layout, this filter is, like Legos or whatever. But we could just as soon do that with text. And the concept of like an email template where you've got a variable in there and then a static email applies. and you could filter that and personalize it. But what we can do at this level is just with generative AI, you can personalize everybody's email so many different ways. It's just absurd. In any event, let's keep going. So,
The important thing is that you're not working at a variable command or function type level that you do in traditional programming or traditional scripting or traditional, this idea of traditional templates where you vary a parameter and you get a little bit of variation afterwards. You're dealing with things which you're dealing with feature sets, which deal with concepts, which deal with much higher levels of abstraction here. And people are not used to thinking in those terms, is really
no,
the image
and
I'm trying to say.
it's very abstract thinking is what I've found. So, just a quick recap. Chapter 1, we covered this stuff. And since this chapter is about money, we're also going to recap chapter 1 in a little bit more detail. We covered chapter 2, which was a walkthrough about how I taught my daughter to create professional illustrations with generative AI. And then I use it as an example to teach people how to the design thinking around prompt design, UI design for prompt engineering and prompt engineering. And then in chapter 3, we got into how this stuff worked, and we talked about a bunch of use cases. There's a couple of key diagrams in there that we refer to regularly. And as we mentioned earlier, this was the apps and the experience that I went through and learning about this kind of stuff. And just as an example, this was one of the whiteboards. I used a sales script to produce any type of sales and marketing content. I used a white paper for technical people to do the same thing. I selected web pages to do the same thing. I spent time with these 20 different startups or 30. And then I'm using this book as an example, right? So we go through this whole set of experiences that have unfolded over the past 20 months or whatnot. And there's more details to it. Here's some of the startups that we talked about, right? And now we're going to get to, segment 1 of this episode, this chapter. So that's just a quick recap of what we've covered so far. And I will say, in this case, if you look just past my logo, I also have been using DALL-E, OpenAI DALL-E for most things. In this case, I wanted to try out Adobe Firefly to see how it does. And as you can tell, actually, I'm mistaken. The original image here I created with Adobe Firefly, and they watermarked everything. Thank you so much. But then there was the simple filter, which is actually a PowerPoint filter. So segment 1 brought to you by the big green money shot ball. And chapter 5 in the book is about this stuff. Right? You can see again in the book, I always have this theme of red pill and blue pill. And then there's elements of Leonardo da Vinci as well as Shakti, right? Which you can kind of see here. I think in this case, I asked it to also put her in like a superhero costume. I had to tell it, her age, her gender, stuff like that. But this is the kind of programming that's an example of programming in English that lets you adjust abstract variables. All right, like we just talked about. In any event, with organ budget changes, this is what we're going to go through. How do things change with departments and budgets, and how you got to think differently, and what are kind of the crawl, walk, run steps to get started with. So let's recap quickly the executive summary from chapter 1, because these two kind of intertwine. All right, again, value migration, the bottom line, big analogy, benefits business case, and the white collar revolution. If you want to go back to chapter 1, episode 1, you can get way deeper on this, but I'm going to give a flyby. So part of our featured segment always is the GEO point of view. And when we say GEO, that could be the CEO who's a generative CEO. Right? I would consider whoever's leading generative AI on the executive team, they're kind of the GEO. But this is the view from the top, the way everyone should be thinking, right? And so I consider the GEO segment this recap of chapter 1. And basically, if you're not familiar with value migration, go look at Adrian Salatsky. What it says is basically when a market is starting, you got more value, then you get stability, you get not so many players, you got some competitors, and then eventually value outflows. Usually, at least in the software industry, this is like a 10-year period, something like that. And the company and the market value go down over time until, really in this light red or pink area, it's a race to the bottom and people are doing cost cutting. And while this is from 95, Gen AI is forcing this transition. This is an explanation. It's really an analogy for people to unpack and talk about. But if we look at Ford Motor Company versus Tesla and the amount of automation on this assembly line versus that assembly line, in the area of generative AI, what we've got to think about is, well, what is sales doing? What is marketing doing? And what is the product doing as these things overlap? And again, I'm talking mainly in the software industry. So if we just look like at customer Q&A or marketing output, right? This is the old way. This is the old assembly line. This is the way it's going to be in the future, but instead, or it's here really, we've shown example after example. But you can think of this in terms of content, right? As opposed to putting out a car, you're putting out a nice robust white paper or answering some frequently asked questions or something like that. In this model, you had a bunch of humans and some automation. In this model, what you've got is process engineers who are teaching the robots to do the things that the robots need to do, right? And that's the big difference. We're going from manual production of content, manual answering of questions, whether that's customer service or sales, to people's jobs are going to be being the process engineer for a bot, right? And that's what they're starting to teach now at the higher end engineering colleges for certain. This was another slide. I'll just make one point here, and we're going to dive deeper on this point. If you count all the money you spend on sales and marketing, especially B2B, if it's B2C, you might just look at the marketing department because those are a little different. But over some period of 3 years, and I think it's going to flatten in 18 months, you can reduce the cost of sales and marketing significantly. Now, how long it takes you, etc., you got to range find, right? You got to do some modeling. You got to decide how many people. But whether you're doing a mega business case, a pragmatic one, or a gut feel with proof, this is the fundamental thing that's real. And if you ask your CIO how they're using ChatGPT and things like that, or Copilot on the developer side, you should get a very similar answer. Although they have a lot of legacy stuff to deal with, whereas sales and marketing don't have to deal with those legacy systems quite the same. In any event, we also talked about the white collar evolution. So you got executives that are really going to have to become Gen AI executives. You have management is going to become Gen AI management. You're going to have a group that has to really change, right? This is why the book was written. This is why the show is being done. Not just to help the businesses, but to help people get through this transition faster, because it's going to be hard. I've been through it. It is an existential experience to realize you can be, you can be automated. And the same thing's going to happen with the front line. Our show right now, we're still trying to figure out what platform we want to use long term. So we're using the baby version of Zoom. So consider that pop up a free advertisement from Zoom. In any event, we got about 10 minutes left before we'll restart one. But let's keep going here. So that's the quick recap of chapter 1. Tom, any quick major points there before? And by the way, Tom, this is not going to be a super long show. It's a fairly short chapter, and there's a lot of whiteboarding. So you can take a few minutes. We try to keep on time because we don't want these to get too long. But any key thoughts there from chapter 1? Just like a big headline before we dive into chapter 5.
The headline is your CFOs are going to mandate some of these cuts or some of these adjustments before the capabilities are built. They're just going to mandate them. Then they're going to say, we've done our part. Now it's up to you. So you can either get ahead of that, or you can live with the consequences of it. But we've seen this with other
Well,
much
Wall
smaller
Street
trends
knows.
in the market.
Wall Street knows at this point that,
Yeah.
what is the saying? The cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
that it? I mean,
yeah. And in this case, the cat's going to be taken out behind the barn. I mean, it's
I hope
yeah,
not. I
yeah,
hope not. In any event, maybe the cat will reinvent itself.
yes.
Either that or what's it called when karma, right? When you come back as a different thing, right? So maybe they'll come back as a different thing. In any event, Tom, you're porting out this, and it's just we've been through this so much. I'd be really surprised if you're a really good CFO and you're a good human. I'll put it that way too, because I generally don't like any of the ones that aren't good humans. No one likes working for ones that aren't good humans. No one likes working in any role for somebody who's a jerk. In any event, if they understand what's happening on Wall Street and they're reading their trade rags, they should quickly come to a conclusion that they just say, I want to cut 10% of the cost, and I want you to do 3 to 5x more output in 2024. I think that's going to be a pretty common email, right? that's the main point.
It's certainly going to be a discussion topic, yes, if not a mandate in some places.
Yeah, yeah,
Next year, probably a mandate in a few more.
yeah. If you wait 3 years to jump all over this, your business design is going to be, it's not going to be good. Same
Well,
thing.
somebody else will be making the mandate.
Yep.
That's all.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So the sections here, again, we talked about what we're covering. So let's dive right into it. I always like this dog thought process board, and it's funny if you want to pause and pick it up, but I like getting to the point of, are you allowed to pee on it? And this to me needs to be redrawn as a decision box, because the dog is, are you allowed? Yes, I'm allowed. No, I'm not. Or I don't know, right? It's a little bit more complicated diagram than this. However, here's the changes across departments. All right. And I'm gonna move us down here. All right, so people can see the key takeaways. These are on every slide. But if you're planning, and when I write the book, here was the mindset, and then Tom, you can, give me some contents on it. I got about this is a fairly short chapter, so we've got 3 whiteboards in here. We can take a good 15 minutes, 5 minutes each or so to unpack this. Sorry. Whenever I get started doing a show, I get these little micro belches. It's so weird. They just keep coming, and no one on air ever says they're actually belching into the microphone. So I apologize, but
too many red and blue pills.
Yeah, there you go. So in today's B2B world, right? These things, and this could be product as opposed to ops, those are kind of interchangeable, or maybe there's 4 circles in the Venn diagram. You get the point. But this is where, right, the show is focusing. And so a lot of times these things are not very aligned. Like in a lot of B2B software companies, you see sales and marketing working together, and maybe that little point is if you really use a combined CRM system across sales and marketing, which is very hard to do just because of the sheer number of external marketing apps that there are that you got to use. But maybe your core CRM is the same, like, name it, HubSpot, whatever. And then you've got marketing ops here, right, which may be bigger. There's relationships between product and marketing. But the point is, of course, ops, especially with money and closing the books, there's a bigger overlap here. The idea is this is a little bit more jumbled. And CRM has brought it together. right? So maybe if you're advanced, you've got this part of the Venn diagram in here that overlaps much better, and you've kind of got this universal CRM that, product brings segment.io and sales brings something else, and it all kind of works together. But that is not with generative data. That is with rows and records, right? And while the CRM players are adding generative stuff to it, what most people are doing, unless they're the top 1% and they've really gone into the deep end and they're investing very heavily, is people are doing these generative AI pilots, right? So as a CFO, what you're seeing is like, here's kind of current state. And what you're not going to be able to see is when the salesperson here is becoming 5 to 10 times more productive just using generative AI, which they can do without any major system capabilities. Same thing with marketing. Same thing with product people. Same thing with strategy people, right? This is happening, but you're not entirely you don't have full purview. It's not fully visible unless, some executive is taking this stuff and running it up the flagpole. And a lot of those executives also realize when you run something like that up the flagpole, you all of a sudden get to be on the hook for doing something about it, right? So this is going to create a lot of money in the psychology industry. Therapists are going to get very busy because you're going to be judged. Yeah. Tom, go ahead.
I mean, in the short term, people's career advancements are a function of being able to show successful generative AI pilots and somehow making a go with this. So, I mean, that's for the ambitious. It is certainly the accelerant, probably
Yep.
more so than almost any other.
Yep. And so,
Uh,
go ahead.
the thing that doesn't come out here in these charts, these show the functional areas using these things, is that process engineering part that underlies all this. Typically we represent that as a different diagram. That's not what it's not what anybody thinks about. It's when you're building and curating your knowledge bases, your process engineers and the people who are responsible for the inputs and the regular curation of those contents. That's the stuff that determines whether this works well or not, and that's not even shown on the diagram.
Yeah.
And
I really think if we're going to add that in, what we're saying is, as you build, as you start to become more mature in this area, one, you're going to want to do things that not just allow one person to be like 3 to 5 or 10 times more productive, but for a whole, group of people, right? And it reminds me of creating an app like for a sales team where everybody's kind of using the same structure. We want to collect this data and we'll give you reports on that, or we'll let you edit it. Same.
Very similar. The enterprise or the universal customer definition, the enterprise product definition.
Go ahead.
So Adam, you really you noted it down here. The source Gen I data should be the same. That that understates nicely the process engineering and the application stack with access to highly curated data, which drives all this stuff. Because if that highly curated data is not, each of those different areas is going to be 3 to 5 times faster producing something that's misaligned with your customers or with the overall objective company.
Let's back up one step here. So we were talking about how this kind of same process existed with CRM, right? You had your individual. First, everybody was doing their own thing over here, and then you started to have CRM elements in marketing and with product and with sales, and then you try to start integrating them, right? So at one point, this was a fully integrated CRM, or at least you want, like you were about to say, mastered customer data management and stuff like that. In this world of generative, right? So for a CFO, when you get integrated here, you will have already seen cost. You can see cost drop here without doing a whole lot of heavy lifting. But when you want to get to the point of scaling the organization, you're going to need some type of sales-oriented language model and a product-oriented one and a marketing-oriented language model. And that would represent just one of these groups having a core data knowledge base that everyone can work off of. But the customer doesn't care. The customer wants a consistent answer. And so to really get to that high maturity level, you really need to have a single base where everyone can pull from, including the customer experience, right? So with that laid out, what I'm trying to say is that the organizational change is going to look like this. It's a familiar pattern, but it's not the same as traditional apps. And Tom, you were talking for a minute about master customer data management or things like that, and the source Gen AI data should be the same. So can you tie that again to here?
Yeah, I mean that was really has been one of the fundamentals for CRM to be effective was getting to universal entity definitions, which are used throughout the various functions, so that each one didn't define things incompletely and semi-independently, which fractures the customer experience. And similarly, on the generative AI side, while we're oftentimes we're dealing with semi-structured or unstructured data, we need to have things there which are highly curated, which can survive the looks from the different perspectives, which are actively maintained, so that you don't have old stuff crowding out the new or confusing it.
Yep.
And you need to be able to have the sales look, the marketing look, and those are basically facets that build on the same linked generation, the same linked definition that's there. And people who have this appreciation are the ones who need to be in charge of the curation process or processes by which
Yep.
our curated small language model is maintained, because that's the family jewels there. I mean, that's
And we've talked about the curated small language model in other shows, for sure. And so in kind of CFO speak here, you are not, when you're here, again, you're going to see you're not probably going to see the productivity boost unless an executive escalates it and says, "Oh, look what I'm doing," right? But
basically he needs to be able to link up more than one functional area.
yep.
That's the key here, is to be able to
And
cross functional areas and cross what were traditionally siloed knowledge areas.
yep. And I probably should have another set of circles in here. Probably need to update this diagram, but there will be this small language model, which is, just to make sure everyone's clear, I think most CFOs will know that a large language model is ChatGPT or Anthropic or Google or whatever. But what's going to end up happening here first before you get over here is probably another step in the org change. But what I was saying before is we got these little pilots, but at some point, somebody in marketing is going to figure out how to automate a few marketers, right? And they're going to have to do that. They're going to have a small language model to do that. I don't see any other way around it. It would make no sense to do it without it. Same thing in sales, right? So as opposed to this consolidation coming here, what you're going to end up having is you're going to have this group has a small language model, this one has one, and this one has one. Now you could merge all those, and I don't think it would actually be terribly hard to get value from that, except where it's used in all these areas, you're still going to want to make sure it serves all the use cases, and version control is going to become a big deal. And when you have the generative AI app begin to prompt a customer for some information versus vice versa, in other words, as a customer is talking to the bot, let's see, here's a bot, it's got antennas and a smile. That's the bot. If you have a new product coming out or you have a major change to an old product, how do you manage the quality, right? How do you make sure that all customer experience use cases, scenarios, or questions are still coming out where you prioritize the latest information over the past? That's going to be a big deal. And you can't really you can start to do that when you're in this middle path here, which I'm calling a small language model in each department. But at some point, you've got to apply version control. You've got to have mechanisms to know what to include and what not to include. You're going to have this feedback mechanism, human in the loop. So things are just going to get way, way, way more complex technically. And so the organization is going to change to a more technical and a more integrated organization. I think that's the big takeaway for the CFO.
He needs to view that as a corporate asset.
Or she or they. Keep going. I'm just messing with you.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm just thinking of how you're going to draw the bot next. But anyway, so the CFO needs to view that those knowledge bases and the bots which interact as corporate assets, which are either increasing in value or decreasing.
Yeah.
And the ability, if you can increase their usage and keep them current, their value increases tremendously, and you get these wonderful benefits at scale. If you get if you're in the situation where your data, your small language model is not so highly curated, and you've got incomplete data, outdated data, inconsistent data, what you have then is, people need to check that stuff a lot more often, or you're going to have bad customer experiences or bad customer experiences. And so it is viewing that as an asset who you can actually measure its properties of is actually, the measurement of that is actually easier than measurement of people.
Yeah, this is true. It is true. And so again, I've known we've taken a lot of dips and dives. I think CFOs that are more technical will understand, how we've explained this. I do feel like I need to improve a slide, but again, the org change is going to be a big cost shift. And what we're going to see is disjointed into these individual pilots that turn into small language models. And again, the small language model is what enables more than one person to scale with high quality. And then eventually you're going to have to bring these things together. And so there's org change with that. As you go here, you're going to have more technology and less people. And again, as you go here, you're going to have the people that you need to be more technical. So if you think about that, your human resources and salary cost is going to go down per person, because you're gonna have some people go away, but then what you pay the technical ones is probably going to be more, and then your technology budget is going to adjust, obviously, to replace humans, but it's pennies on the dollar, right? So as far as departmental change, I think that's what a CFO needs to look at. And I'll hit the main point here, because going through that process, let's say you've got right now 10% Gen AI and 90% is done by a human. All right. And in the model we talked about in chapter 1, and the fact that people can do back of the napkin math to reduce costs this way, right? Over a 3-year period, maybe it's a little longer, there's range finding, but the new cost should flatten in month 18. When you get to where 60% is done, and this represents the person, right? And this represents the bot. So when you get to 60% manual, and they're spending the other 40% of their time with the bot, training the robot, improving the robot, right? That's going to be a big shift. So I think this timeline here, I mean, doing it myself, honestly, if somebody wants to, if they read the book or they have a small engagement or good conversation with us, actually, if they read the book, they should be able to get through here in 1 week to 1 month. I mean, it just shouldn't take that long for them to start using generative AI right away. To get to here, if they become advanced users, and I would say we are already advanced users. But if they have the right leadership, I mean, gosh, I've been looking at this and talking to you about it for 20 months. So we've got a fair amount of expertise compared to what's in the world. But for them to switch this, I think you can do it in 3 months. I really do. Now, that would be a big push where it's a priority and other things don't take precedence. Otherwise, I think, you're looking at 6 months, and certainly this depends on the scale of the company. I'm talking about like a more middle-sized or small business, 50 million to 500 million, let's say, versus like a $5 billion company. Yeah, like everything else, it's going to be 18 months, right? And then here, when you get to the AI is doing 90%, and then the people are doing 10% manual work and they're spending the rest of their time with the AI. So let's just say they're managing the AI, but that ends up being 90% of their time, right? And here, easily 10x output, here, easily 100x output, here, easily 1000x output. Again, if you watch the show, you're like, oh, you're full of it. No, go look at what we do. You could literally, if you had a task analysis person, look at this show and make some estimates about what it took for me to do something before and after generative AI. In each one of these cases, I guarantee, I absolutely am certain, and we can demo this, that it'll happen. So I think people, this is going to be the hardest part, because the more you got to automate, the more details, the more quality assurance, the more test cases and things like that. But once you can get through this, and again, I think it's the same, 3 to 6 months, 18 months max, that's what you're going to get to. And so you're talking about proving out the model relatively. I built both pilots for what I did. In the guy I had build them for me, he's amazing. Technologist, MBA type, super fast. But what I asked him to build, yeah, they weren't super robust. However, I got here in a week. And then the company I was working for automated solution architecture in about 3 to 6 months. If you go, if you're a CFO and you go back and look at these, or email Tom, it's undeniable. I still feel like everyone I talk to is very hesitant, and they're not really, people have their gut knee-jerk reactions when they're playing with one thing and go, oh, this is amazing. But then they don't go put it in this context. In the financial context, for me, I already did this as a pilot in a week. I could prove this out as a pilot in a week. Now, what did it take along these phases? You're not going to go through that fast. And your biggest issue is going to be HR, leadership, and showing people how they can get onto the next generation of their career, versus I hate the companies that don't do that and they just come right out and go, oh, like IBM did with a bunch of marketing and communications people. Let's just tell them, they're gone, as opposed to people knowing they have to get this new skill set. In any event, I always, Tom, as you know, I always try to shoot holes in the head of my statements or my presentations or whatever. After going through this with me and having presented to so many, C-level, board level meetings and all the stuff you've done in your life, is this deniable? Go ahead, shoot a hole in the head of this horse. Can a CFO bank on this in general terms?
Actually, um, the things that you described with yourself are unique in that um, you went full steam ahead to do it.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I was at a small enough company where I didn't have to go through any hoops. I didn't have to
yes,
coordinate anything. It was just like, I'm gonna go do a pilot in this area. I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
yeah, all that coordination stuff you talked about earlier, that didn't have to happen, or didn't, or it was minimal in
Yep.
order for you to operate. So obviously the more coordination that's there, um, the longer it'll take. But the other thing is this: the big challenge that nobody wants to talk about is most people, and you're not like most people. You and I aren't like most people.
Yeah,
Um,
we're weird.
yeah, we're different. We
Some
we'll
people
charge
might
right
say
ahead.
it, and you characterize that in a much less positive fashion.
Yes, yes. Anyway, just let it be for the moment. Um, but most people aren't going to raise their hand to have their fingers cut off. Okay,
Yeah.
they aren't going to want to do the IBM experience, which has been, IBM's been just wonderful to not just say they did it, but to actually go promote how they did it.
To Wall Street. Yeah.
Yes, to Wall Street and to potential customers.
Yeah.
Hey, we can go screw with your organizations the way we did to ours. Um, and who's going to cooperate with that? We're here from IBM. We're here to whack 40% of your sales
No,
and marketing
no,
folks.
no one, I've had the hardest time with this because I decided to be front and center about this happening. And it it hurt. And a lot of people have said, like, people don't want to hear that. And I'm like, I know they don't want to hear that. But if I
Well, yeah,
care about them as a human, if I care about them in their career, if these people were working for me, I would want to have worked with them and then be better off in their life and career having crossed paths with me than not. That's just me. And I think that's the good human way as opposed to the a-hole way, which again, no one likes to work for those types of people. So to me,
well, in this
I
case,
think, well, hang on. I think people need to just get smacked in the face with this. It's like a kind thing to shake somebody up and go, hey, it's like somebody who's, got some chronic condition from eating too much of the wrong food or something. It's like at some point you got to shake them and go, hey, you got to do this. And so
yeah,
I decided to be slap in the face. Look, wake up, read this, watch this, learn how it applies to your job. Go get all this learning so that in your next gig, you're able to contribute to the AI side of the equation. Right. So sorry, I had to speak from the heart on that. But what were you about to say?
and I don't mean to be overly critical, but no one's
Please.
going to see any improvement, any of these order of magnitude improvements if people don't want to. And ultimately deciding what to do and how to deal with the people part of this is really the part that hasn't been well solved today, and that's an upcoming question, and that's a question for society at large, for companies at large. And I know a lot of companies say we don't care about those things. We're only concerned with P&L or the next quarter or how we might look, better look to Wall Street or others. But more and more, they have to take into account all their stakeholders, including employees or potential employees.
Yep.
But the people, the companies that are going to do well with this are the ones who are going to take into account the people. And it seems almost contradictory, but no one's going to want to go forward in an environment which is fearful, which doesn't reward um, innovation,
Yeah. I
which
mean,
doesn't
uh,
reward
Honestly, and I do some life coaching and executive coaching stuff, and I've been an advisor, with some really smart people with 5 or more exits. I I think you're right. Like if you are, and the CFO, I know we're switching to HR for a second, but if you destroy your brand as a place of preferred employment, there's going to be big issues. And so, for example, one of the things that should be happening is training everybody on generative AI, right? You really, if you're going to get talent on board, right, they want to know they're going to grow in this skill set. That's just the future, right? And I'll underscore something else you said besides change management. This outlook, it's not just in sales and marketing. When you look at Copilot, or what was the one that came across not too long ago and kind of scared all the developers? I can't think of it right now. But just, again, we go back to Microsoft and their use of generative AI to write code or actually build apps in Copilot. The CIO, CTO developer world is already experiencing this.
Oh, very much.
It's 10 years ahead of what sales and marketing is probably. And those folks
it's 3 years. It's 3 years.
All right, it's 3 years. And those folks are probably more than any other segment on earth, the ones that are learning new technology the fastest. At least a lot of them, right? Because it changes so fast. In any event, I'm also seeing this recognition of this shift at a country level, right? What we've seen, I can't remember if it was the Philippines or Malaysia or what, but they were one of the first countries to put a law in that says every citizen that wants to can get trained on this stuff as a government stipend or whatever it's called. And that makes sense. That makes sense. Do you want to be an economic force of the future? Do you want to be a company force of the future? Do you want to hire the best talent? Right? Now, at the same time, well, I'll just leave it at that. So let's go on to the next slide because we got about 15 minutes left and we could go on and on about this. But hopefully this banter and back and forth dialogue and exploration, CFO should be getting a good sense of it. Now, this is the budget stuff. So where do I want to move? Changes in budgets. Can you see that? So this is sales at the top, shown as a percentage of budget, and marketing at the bottom. And what I'm trying to say here is that here's your people costs, here's your tech ops costs, and here's your Gen AI costs. Now, these things will probably be combined, but let's talk about tech ops as the past and Gen AI as tech ops is still going to happen in the future, but Gen AI is another path in the future. And so if this is where you currently are, you're maybe spending, what does that look like, 10 or 20% on ops, and the rest of this is headcount, right? And what I'm saying is, this is going to go down. Now, what your timeline is on those past 2 slides and how long this takes has so many variables. But you're going to increase your cost in generative AI some. You're probably not going to, you might be able to decrease these costs. It depends on how your IT team is helping you and where you are. But
if those costs are tied to licensed by seat or person, yeah.
Yeah. And then what you should be able to do with this generative AI cost is make all these folks way more productive, which means you should be able to reduce some headcount. All right. I don't like saying it that way. I like saying make these people more productive, but we're talking CFO world here, right? And so then you see the gray stuff move down here, and I'm just assuming this is the same cost, but all of a sudden you've got more Gen AI budget. And then again, you're either growing and keeping the people or you're reducing the cost of people. This is the big variable. But by the time you get here, because again, back here, I've already seen it. I can be 3, 5, 10x more productive with basic prompting if I learn how to use it without any systems. Getting between here and here, you're starting to add systems, right? But easily 100, 1,000 times more productive for certain things right, you start to see the overall cost of this go down. And this is when you have your Gen AI process engine salespeople, process engineering salespeople, and you're still going to have your tech stack, but you're going to have more people focused on, you're going to have more generative AI costs, right? And this may actually lower, but conceptually it's directional, it's guidance. I'm not giving you a map, I'm giving you a compass. This is what's going to happen to sales, right? And I'm breaking this out as B2B versus B2C. Right now, this is more oriented towards B2B, but you could combine these two and look at it as B2C. Before I move over to marketing and explain basically the same thing, because it's a slight variation, what are your thoughts on that and this past few slides or pages?
I mean, this, if we look at the history of CRM and we look at the history of sales ops, um, there's probably not a vendor in the space that doesn't show something kind of like this, except with their preferred application in the in the gray box.
And they
Um,
want to give you specific numbers as versus range finding, which always bugs me. But keep going.
yeah, it's okay, and everyone's more productive, everyone's happier, especially the vendors of the sales op product that they're
Right.
pushing. But so that it this is not a new type of thing. What's new about it is the relative size of the magnitude of the improvements, which are not really shown so much on the slides. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and the issue, and I think the limiting issue in all this is how people will embrace these. Because if sales guys don't embrace it right away, it, it's it'll be a little longer.
Yeah.
And there's a whole
And
bunch
and
of
and
things that have to happen to incent that and to create the environment for it. But this is absolutely possible, leaving the people aspects out of it for the moment. This
yeah.
is absolutely possible. The ones who are going to be able to realize this are the ones who manage the people aspects of it well.
Yeah, leadership, the other things we were talking about, training, but on the B2B sales side, and I can't remember if we said it earlier on this show or on a previous show, um, it's also very scary to change the comp plan because that's your whole business design. It really represents your whole business design. If you try to completely change a whole $500 million B2B sales force comp plan overnight, it's not going to go well.
Let's
Anyway,
talk
with
about, yeah,
marketing,
yeah.
we've got kind of the same stepwise function here. Again, we just saw her pop up. We're trying to figure out, which permanent conferencing solution. So that's an advertisement for Zoom. But going through this stuff and talking about it is what CFOs and HRs and leaders need to do. And I pray they do the kind thing for their employees. I really do. That's one of the biggest drivers in my heart for writing this. Do the right thing by people. It is not fun to be automated by AI. It is scary as hell. I will
Well,
tell you
here's the thing.
personally.
Here's the thing, Adam. Um, as much as we oftentimes make our first pitch and appeal to people's kindness and better selves, they're not going to get to that wonderful outcome, the big impact, unless they create the better environment. That's the so we're asking them to do it because of to be good or to be good people.
Be good humans. That's
That's
not enough.
nice. It's not enough, and it's actually, if you want to see the biggest impact, potential impact that you can have, you have to treat this in a very different way, just because of the effects it's going to have on so many people
Yeah.
and your organizational
And
brand.
your whole business design. Yeah, and your whole business design. So we got about 8 minutes left here. Let's keep going. Oh, I whiteboarded on top of that one instead of the separate one. So, all right.
Uh, I did want to just put one thing out there, and this comes from some of the benchmarking that I've done with TSIA and the work with them over the years. is, SG&A costs have just inched up, sometimes more than inched up. They're relatively high as a percentage of overall company spend, and they need to come down. And
Yeah.
so it's I mean there's a lot of forces there to go and address that. And this is certainly a tool or a means by which some of that can happen. But there's a tremendous pressure in that area to bring those things down, and
Yep.
that I don't see that going away.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, this is yeah. Anyway, so I want to make one more comment here for the CFO and the folks looking at owning budgets and org changes. And we're going to crawl, walk, run differently. And the main point I want to make is that we've made a lot of B2B or B2C CRM investments. And that was about collecting data. All right. That was about reporting on data. Social media was about letting anyone express a communication, and they created enormously, and still do, enormously greater amounts of data than inside companies, right? And you have to kind of look at the concept of a media company as equivalent to an AI investment, and certainly a generative AI investment. It's more like a media investment. And I'm talking about if you're not a software company, all right? So let's say you're selling financial services or you're selling airplanes or whatever. But if you were buying, pick your CRM and you're like, okay, I want to get an investment. Here's kind of the business plan. And then after 2 or 3 years, you hope you got the return, and you don't put quite the investment into it after the first release, right? And then you have small updates, incremental updates. In this area, you've got to look at this as an investment of a product that needs to be nurtured and managed, much like a manufacturing plant, except it's something that is going to do what a lot of people can do. And if you shortchange that over your modeling for the next 3 years of investment, you are going to really screw up the results of your company, in my opinion.
Well, as
Because,
we said before, this is the family jewels. The
yeah,
knowledge base here is really the knowledge base of the company, and it is absolutely easier to measure this than it is to measure individuals or people.
yeah,
So companies will be judged, and someone within the company will be judged on whether they support and grow this thing or whether they choke it and stifle it.
yeah,
Uh, yeah.
yep. And so, again, you can download the book from the website, but you can understand the basic steps that will, again, I believe with those basic steps, you can get to what we showed here relatively quickly. You can get to what we showed here in phase one, and it doesn't have to take a lot, but you need people that know what they're doing, or you're just kind of barking around in the dark and learning as you go, which is fine. A lot of people are going to be doing that too. So anyway, I want to try to wrap this up in the next 4 minutes so we keep it to an hour. Since we did so much whiteboarding, and we pretty much covered that. And, we've got plenty of other demonstration stuff and other shows. Since this one was money and HR and people focused, this next segment is just going to be fun. So, again, we always, this segment is brought to you by the Big Blue Money Ball in this case, and we're going to dedicate it to Suno. I know we pitch Suno in like every single conversation, every one of these shows, because we both love the product. And if you're a product person or a media creator, right? Any marketing person, any salesperson. Oh, look, give me the thumbs up. Let's see if it'll do the heart. Will it do the heart? 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 No, won't do the heart. Does the thumbs up though. Didn't do it again. In any event, whether you're creating some kind of content as a sales or marketing group, this is a great case study. Are you trying to do a thumbs down? Thanks, thumbs. Appreciate you.
Just try and see if it works.
Okay. You can wave. I think that one works. Anyway, maybe you have to do a karate chop. But it's such a great example to pick apart and try to apply their thinking to what the output is. I mean, I could literally map all of their app to marketing output, right? If somebody can think about that, think that way as a product person or as a sales and marketing leader, it's just such an amazing, huge shout out to the company. All right, so in the next 2 minutes and 10 seconds, there is a segment I'm thinking about, and I'd love to hear from people. And Tom, 20 seconds or so of your thought, but should we do a segment that really picks apart GPT commerce, right? And this is an example of a company where you can ask it to make a perfect gift selection, right? Does Amazon have this yet? They've got to. I haven't heard about it yet. It's got to be on their site somewhere.
Well, they have. You can make almost anything a gift, and you can if you go.
No, I mean the specific GPT stuff where it's like, make a recommendation for my friend Tom. He loves Hawaiian shirts. I'd like to spend $50. No. Like that kind of thing. Okay, it's coming soon. So maybe this is a segment. I also kind of like the idea of a generative game show, right? So this one I modeled after Family Feud, right? Tom, name something you can never find when you need it.
My hair. Thank you.
It generated an answer that says 35 out of the top 100 or whatever are going to be the keys, which is big for me. And then this last one, I think you'll get a kick out of. I've been trying to come up with a logo because I am very much into having an app where if someone can anonymously tell you you're being a jerk. So this represents anonymous and a butt. And I asked ChatGPT to do it. And so I got this superhero figure now who's masked and he's kind of sitting in something. And this one, that was the best it would do. But
I just got the Green Lantern thing back, and I think.
Wow. Anyway, we're running out of time. This is Kazyaka Duprabrania Zadarma Namohej Stroni Dezekio. I'm sure I'm screwed that up, but that is Polish for free book download at my website. And folks, that is the